I'd like to read to you an article by Molly Larkin. It's called The History of the United States Constitution, What We Weren't Taught in School. Now, I've known that the United States Constitution had been modeled after the Iroquois Nation for many, many years now. I've researched it, I would say, about 20 years ago. And this article has some very interesting information that I didn't know about, in particular, the Peacemaker and the Great Law of Peace. In my mind, I always thought that Jesus, Yeshua, had come to the Americas and had taught the Native American people. Now, you decide whether you think the Peacemaker is Yeshua, Jesus, or, possibly somebody else. You may disagree, but that's what I think. So I'm going to be reading this article verbatim, word for word, what Molly had written down. So here we go. If you're like me, I was taught in grade school that the United States Constitution was based on ancient Greek democracy. This is quite a stretch, since ancient Greece government was not democratic. My research into what children are taught today about the origin of our government is also disappointing. Apparently, the Founding Fathers simply created it out of thin air, or were influenced by European governments. This despite the fact that there was no democracy anywhere in Europe at that time. The true history of the United States Constitution. The truth is that the United States Constitution is modeled in both principle and form on the Great Law of Peace of the Native American nation known as the Iroquois. This is absolutely, unequivocally historical fact. In 1987, the United States Senate acknowledged that the Great Law of Peace of the Iroquois Nation served as a model for the Constitution of the United States, U.S. Resolution 76, December 2nd, 1987. And since the United States Constitution was also a model for the Charter of the United Nations, the Iroquois' Great Law of Peace is also a basis of international law. When the Founding Fathers looked for examples of effective government and human liberty upon which to model a constitution to unite 13 colonies, they found it in the government of the Iroquois Nation. In the 18th century, the Iroquois League was the oldest, most highly evolved participatory democracy on Earth. I find it sad that the true story is still not taught in our schools, but here it is. The Peacemaker and the Great Law of Peace. In the 12th century, or so it is written or passed down, 5 nations in what is now the northeastern U.S. were constantly at war. The Mohawks, Seneca, Oneida, Onondaga, and Cayucas. The wars were vicious and, according to tribal history, included cannibalism. One day, a canoe made of white stone carried a man, born of a virgin, across Onondaga Lake to announce the good news of peace had come, and the killing and violence would end. He traveled from village to village over the course of years, preaching peace because the peace was the desire of the Creator. Oral history says it may have taken him 40 years to reach everyone and get agreement from all 5 nations. This man became known as the Peacemaker. Eventually, the 5 nations agreed to the Great Law of Peace and became known collectively as the people of the Longhouse. Outsiders referred to them as Iroquois. In 1722, the Tuscarora joined the Confederacy, so today it's known as the 6 Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. The Great Law of Peace was a vehicle for creating harmony, unity, and respect among human beings. Its recognition of individual liberty and justice surpasses that of many democracies. The Great Law of Peace includes freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right of women to participate in government, separation of powers, checks and balances within government, a government of people, by the people, and for the people. 3 branches of government, 2 houses and a grand council, a woman's council, which is the Iroquois equivalent of our Supreme Court, settling disputes and judging legal violations. The central idea underlying Iroquois political philosophy is that this peace is the will of the Creator and the ultimate spiritual goal and natural order among humans. The Founding Fathers' consultation with the Iroquois. For decades, the Iroquois had urged the English colonists to unite together as one independent and free people. George Washington, Ben Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson met frequently with the Iroquois and made themselves very familiar with the Great Law of Peace. Washington expressed great excitement over the 2 houses and Grand Council. Several delegates from the Iroquois Confederacy attended the Continental Congress in 1776, as it wrote the Declaration of Independence and drafted the Constitution of the United States, modeling it on the Iroquois Constitution. 3 weeks later, the Declaration of Independence was signed, and the United States of America was born. What got left out of the United States Constitution? In fact, just about the only parts of the Great Law of Peace that our founding fathers didn't incorporate were these. The 7th generation principle. The Constitution of the Iroquois Confederacy states that chiefs consider the impact of their decisions on the 7th generation to come. Number 2, the role of women. Clan mothers choose candidates, who are male, as political leaders. The women maintain ownership of land and homes and exercise veto power over any council action that may result in war. The women can also impeach and expel any leader who conducts himself improperly or loses the confidence of the electorate. When the women choose a new leader, then the women choose a new leader. Imagine how different our world would be today if our government had included these principles from the very start. Wow, that's amazing. The symbols. The Peacemaker designed the tree of peace as a symbol of the Great Law of Peace, a great white pine whose branches spread out to shelter all nations who commit themselves to peace. Beneath the tree, the 5 nations buried their weapons of war. Atop the tree is the eagle that sees afar. There is a bundle of 5 arrows tied together to represent strength of 5 tribes bound together in peace. 4 long roots stretch out in the 4 directions, the white roots of peace. Thomas Jefferson adopted the symbols of the Peacemaker's legend. The tree of peace became the liberty tree displayed on colonial flags. The eagle that sees afar became the American eagle. On the U.S. Great Seal, the American eagle clutches a bundle of 13 arrows representing the original colonies. Our eagle also holds an olive branch, symbolizing that the United States of America has a strong desire for peace, but will always be ready for war. Separate leaders for war and peace. There's no separation of church and state in Iroquois society. Spirituality lies at the root of government and law. However, the Iroquois Confederacy, as with most American nations, Native American nations, had separate leaders for war and peace. As a lawmaker, the leaders would never go to war in his official capacity. If disposed to take the warpath, he laid aside his civil office for the time being and became a common warrior. The colonists followed this model too. The inability to separate the civil government and military has doomed many imitators of American democracy. The 3 principles of the Great Law of Peace. Number 1, righteousness, meaning people must treat each other fairly. Each individual must have a strong sense of justice, must treat people as equals, and must enjoy equal protection under the Great Law. Health. Health means that the soundness of mind, body, and spirit will create a strong individual. Health is also the peacefulness that results when a strong mind uses its rational power to promote well-being between peoples, between nations, and between nations. Yes, sorry. And the third is power. The laws of the Great Law provide authority, tradition, and stability if properly respected in thought and action. Power comes from the united actions of the people operating under one law, with one mind, one heart, and one body. Such power can assure that justice and healthfulness continue. People and nations need to exercise just enough power to maintain the peace and well-being of the members of the Confederacy. It's the omission of these 3 principles, the 7-generation rule, and the role of women, that causes Native Americans today to say, the U.S. copied the Great Law of Peace, but didn't really understand it. So, our forefathers copied a great law of a people whose country we stole, and against whom our government committed genocide and then kept it a secret. It makes me want to cry. Please teach your children the truth of the history of our great country. So here you have it, friends. It's an amazing, amazing article. It's amazing information. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.